Good morning. Bonjour. Good morning. Sabah al-khair, bonjour. I feel really embarrassed because no one is from North Africa, no media council. Does not mean it does not exist, but unfortunately, because of some political, let's make it this way, some political argument within the Union of Arab Maghreb is still fighting for a coherent position. But what I want to say, I think I would have to admit that most of the region in Africa as well developed. That I have to confess. And my region, including Algeria, is lagging behind when it looks at the whole global African perspective. But what my question is, we have seen from different people who have been intervening, different model of governing, if I may say so, the media. Why there is not one coherent media council for the whole continent? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One last question from the floor. I see a hand at the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Enora Gladys from the Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. And I'm so lucky to be here and see some senior editors from the media councils of the African journalism. I'd like to ask, in an era of such social media influencers shaping different opinions concerning the news going viral everywhere, how does media councils from several countries in Africa would like to shape or maybe to evolve to remain prevalent within more the information that is being shared all over the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those questions were not directed at anyone in specific, so please feel free to answer that question. The first question is very, very interesting, and I think that perhaps that is the direction in which we are leading. The proposal or consideration for peer review or accreditation mechanism for regulatory councils. What do you have to say about that?
I'll go first. I think I like the question from our colleague from Algeria, why we do not have one council across all Africa. I would ask him why we do not have one government or one currency across all Africa. So that media regulation takes place in context. We are here, I was sitting with my colleague, the CEO of the Media Council of Malawi. He's a neighbor to Tanzania. It took him 3 days to arrive here. It takes a person in London 7 hours to arrive here, isn't it? So we basically contact. And if you go to Malawi from Tanzania, they do not recognize the Tanzanian money, they recognize the US dollar or the euro. Yet we're just separated by a few meters. So there are many other factors that split us, and we must contextualize that media operations and media regulation happens in context. Secondly, we cannot have a similar media regulatory model because the different levels of democracy and governance systems dictate the other instruments thereof, the judiciaries, the parliaments, the media ecosystem and the regulation. So you cannot have a media ecosystem and regulatory that operates beside the normal system of government. Secondly is that, and as Tawfik said about moving with technology, I think I would go for matters of peer review and all that. In Kenya, 1 month ago, we reviewed our code of conduct for media practice. Specifically, we brought in an entire section on artificial intelligence and use of technologies, matters of betting and all that. So I think it isn't, it is a big forest, but you must realize that we move faster. And luckily for us, as I said, we are in a co-regulatory model. We brought together the media sector guys to agree what are new emerging matters. And we spoke about child protection, ethnic matters, religious extremism, and all that, so that the code 13 years later, further the code was shouldn't operate in isolation. And finally, before my South African colleague speaks, that while the model of keep off government money to maintain independence is good, we must agree, like I think South Africa has a very robust public protector or public prosecutor funded by government, but the funding model is so protected that the money does not dictate how they work. So if any instrument of government or instrument at the service of the people is necessary for cohesive society, it is the duty of that nation to find a way then how they get funded without that money being used for political purposes. So I think if media is an instrument for public good, it should be funded from the public purse, but in a way that it's not a political token. Last week on Friday, the Africa Anti-Corruption Day, I was a panelist on an event organized by Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And I told them that the only people who suffer in the ecosystem of investigative journalism is the media. Everybody, the police, the judiciary, the prosecutors and all that are funded by the public to do that work. The media is supposed to carry out investigations and carry stories under extreme circumstances using their own money. Yet everybody else, even the judges, use public funds. So if we could find a way of insulating certain critical entities in protecting public interests and the people, that way then we do not need the media, either investors or journalists, to use their own money to do a job which the prosecutor or the police or the investigative agencies do in a very shoddy manner using a lot of funds. So finding a way to match that then stands that if media is a public service, then public funds, not government funds, government is just a temporary custodian of the public funds, then public funds can be put in strategic places so that the entire ecosystem is funded. And it brings equality because media is suffering. They have to raise their own money, sometimes borrow loans and look for financing to perform a function that is supposed to be done by other public funded bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the last part on funding in responding to the questions. Looking at some European countries and how they have dealt with the funding issue, I mean, Germany, Belgium, Germany specifically has a household levy of about 18 euros, 36 cents monthly. And they were saying annually they collect about 9 billion euros. That's how their media is funded, particularly the public service media. And I do think that if we were to take that approach, because it's collected from households as part of your electricity and all other utilities that you pay for, so you can't escape it. It wouldn't be easy for the African setting, because I know that we've been talking about this as the SABC board and the difficulties around that entity, because you still have people who have to decide between buying a loaf of bread and paying TV license. We still have serious bread and butter issues that we need to address before you force people to actually get to that level. So if we are to opt for government funding, it's got to be de-risked, and you've got to find a mechanism that protects media entities or media councils from even having to be told that you will only get this if you do that. You are going to have to de-risk it, which is why for the Press Council in South Africa, it remains a huge problem if we were to even consider that. I think the other part that was asked about new age technologies and the impact on journalism and regulating that relates to those. A conversation that we are starting is to think about regulating content and not platforms. Because technology evolves. Tomorrow, it's not going to be content creators, it's not going to be podcasters, it's going to be something else. And day after, it's going to be something else. So is it possible that you are going to have codes for all these things? So if you walk away from platform-centric or device-centric regulation and look at content, that is not going to change. You set levels. For instance, if you have a code that deals with entertainment content, because it's not necessarily correct to think that all content creators are affecting journalism. Some content creators are just in the space of entertainment. They have no interest in journalism. So those content creators would fall under the entertainment code of ethics. And if you have a different one, which is going to deal specifically with journalism issues, content creators that deal with journalistic content would be regulated that side. So you end up with two different content regulatory systems that have different values embedded in them, because content also deals with fictional stuff, which is why you can't regulate it with the same code as journalism. So this is where we need to go. The other part deals with, which is the last part that I want to talk to. It had to do with what my colleague from Algeria said. I think there's value in thinking about a continental body of media councils. Yes, context have to be taken into account, because not just the politics, but the level of development of the countries is not the same. And in fact, maybe we also need to interrogate the intellectual installations of our journalism, because they are still fundamentally colonial. We still have to think about that, let alone the fact that there are internal issues with our own countries that we need to think about. There are differences and idiosyncrasies between and among the countries. So if you're going to have a continental body, the codes themselves have to be embedded in the environment upon which they are supposed to be applied. What I was talking about in terms of thinking about infusing African thought in our code of ethics and in our practice of journalism, how we deal with grief, how we deal with death, how we deal with something as simple as informed consent, where you have to interview children. In a developed country, it's easy to say, I'll speak to the parent, and if the parent allows me to interview the child who has been raped or sexually molested or something of that nature, it's easy in a developed world to say, no, the parent is going to agree or not agree to this. But in a different setting, because our socioeconomic levels are not the same, you gotta have to think, when the parent says, yes, it's okay, you can interview my child, ask yourself the question. The media law allows it if you get consent, but the level of ethics, have you asked the question whether the parent understands what she or he's saying yes to? Does the parent understand how the media works? Does the parent understand the digital footprint which is going to carry the story of this child, and this child will have to confront this in her adulthood later in the years? So there are things that we really need to think about in terms of how we develop our code of ethics, to the extent that they are context sensitive and they take into account our social cultural environments. Thanks.
Thank you very Thank you, Pat. I mean, the notion of informed consent is critically important, and that takes us back to that discussion around media and information literacy. Even if we were to talk about, regulation around entertainment media and then news media, I don't think that the public generally makes that distinction. One final request, just to speak to us about the sustainability model, and then we'll have to wrap it up, unfortunately.
Thank you. Speaking about sustainability model, I think if we really want to see an independence of the media, sustainability is key. And of course, I have heard from my colleagues here about how we can ensure we have a funding model that is really helping the media, whether we get the money from the government or we get the money from a levy. But my views would be, first of all, under the umbrella, and also responding to the colleague from Algeria, of having one model of media councils. I think the umbrella, the network of independent media councils, we can regard it as one of those efforts to unite us. So for the time being, we are about 13 press councils members, so we're inviting more other members so that we can have more strong one voice. And if we get that strong one voice, the entry point is to ensure, because NUCA is there to promote independence of the media in Africa. So, and that will reflect on each of the respective country. And the best way to do is to ask a question, where is the money nowadays going out of the media? We used to have newspapers. I think they are the most suffering media outlets. We have radio, we have TV. They are all suffering in terms of financial sustainability. They used to have their own model of advertisers, getting money from advertisers. Now, that question of where the money is going, my friend from Rwanda has said, Mr. Mugisha, that the tech company, they are eating the money. So the agenda for NUCA should be pushing back this tech company. Even the idea of a certain percent levy should be aligned to tech companies so that it can pay back to the media, traditional media, the legacy media, the newspapers. And by having such kind of a fund, then we can ensure that the media are sustainable.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe that this is not. Okay, thank you. I believe that the discussion around big tech and viability is going to come up later. I wanted to thank Dr. Tvega firstly for her intervention. I'm really excited about the notion that learning and research is going to be very foundational to our discussions going forward. Thank you for that intervention. And from my very knowledgeable panelists, thank you so much for your insights. Please note that our panelists are not going anywhere. Please engage them during the break and during lunch. I'm sure that they'd like to share their insights with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very good discussion. I wish we had more time for that, but seems like we've run short of time. But can somebody manage the mics, please? There is a feedback which is not very good. Well, that we were supposed to have a video as a keynote address also from the African Union, Special Rapporteur on Kwivina Kiresh Topsy. So no, oh my God, name. Kindly, let's have the video before we break for a short breakfast session. Volume. I think we'll watch the video when we come back from tea and coffee's break. I can see the engineers are not ready. So the ushers will give you a coupon for breakfast. Breakfast is on the second floor, just below this floor. And then we'll be back here in 1 moment, in half an hour, please. Thank you very much, and you may applaud yourselves for a very good morning. Asante, Misa. Ushers, please, can you direct our guest where breakfast is being served? Half an hour, please. We have a long day to go. Please look at the timetable, the split after breakfast. There's another session which will include the NIMCA AGM session 1, which will be in the assembly. Hello? 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 Sasa zote amezizima hizi.
Sasa unakuta ile hebu
Hello? Tano naendelea simu.
Hello? Hello? Hamna.
Hello?
Hamna. Hello?
Hello?
Enda wapi?
Naam? Mkutano? Unaweza kusikiliza mkutano? Second Pan African Media Council Summit. Sio wanafanyaje? Tumekuwa muted.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hello, hello.
Hello?
Yes, hello? Kama tujiunge hapo tusikilize mkutano. Tanzania usikilize.